frame it, descriptively as good for Israel, or you can't do this because we're in Iraq.
Right.
If I were to say that, and they did that, and the war was not 33 days long, but 16 days long, and 400 Lebanese who died didn't die.
400?
Well, I'm saying if you cut the war in half,
oh, I see.
So you wouldn't have 1,200 civilians dead. You
right.
have
Right.
600.
Right.
So my concern is, and I'm sure you address this all the time, is that people that actually having to deal with the practical realities of the domestic political situation
right.
and their impact
right.
can't really afford the luxury of your sort of ideological clarity.
Right.
And so I don't really disagree with anything you've said,
right.
but at the same time,
you're
trying to, it seems like,
right.
you're asking big, it's a social problem, it's a large structural.
But domestic reality is not a concrete, unchanging, fixed element of American policy. And we've seen examples where domestic realities, even on Israel, can be changed. We remember that Jimmy Carter pushed very hard, against support of Israel in what he was trying to achieve. Even though I disagree with everything he's doing, but that's an example of a president who was able to do that. He lost the election, but I don't think he did for that reason. I think about George Herbert Walker Bush when he stood at one moment against the Israeli lobby on the loan guarantees for Israel, $10 billion in loan guarantees. So these things can be achieved if the president wants it. The question is, why would a president want it? Why does a president want to extract as many concessions with Israel and for a high political price here in the United States? The answer has to be for the president to be passionate about peace or justice, which I don't think that we have, or we've had in I don't know when. So that's not going to happen. That is one time where that could occur. Or to say, this is worthwhile in return for interest for American national security, which is the argument that was trying to be floated, I think deliberately floated, in America, in the New York Times, to test the waters. And I think the reaction to it, put it to rest once and for all, in my opinion. So, you're right. I speak from a very different perspective, but this is why, again, if Zbigniew Brzezinski does not anymore belong to the mainstream of American discussion on Israel, somebody like me is more like somebody on another planet. The entire parameters and rhetoric or discourse is something that I do not share with all the debate about the Middle East, where they start from the virtues of the peace process. If I differ with them on this, of course I am in a different world altogether,
But can I ask one
yeah.
sort of relatedly?
Yeah.
It seems very easy to put Obama up as a pinata or the peace process as a pinata, but also it seems to ignore the fact that there's a very large political, ideological process to make Palestinians invisible. So even if you have a peace process, and even if you just symbolic value of mentioning Palestinian suffering, or talking about just the suggestion that the Palestinians have rights, has some symbolic value in the sort of larger discussion. Yes, and you can trace out any number of policies where it becomes completely hypocritical, not validated through any series of actions.
I don't understand your point.
You don't understand my point?
No.
Well, I guess my point is that the problem is social in the United States with respect to U.S. policy in the Middle East. It's economic, it's political, it's social, it's cultural. And so you're taking Obama as, I guess you're using Obama as a foil for talking about larger U.S. policies in the Middle East, which I think is fair. But at the same time, it's like these problems are so large and structural that you have to address those problems.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right. I totally agree with you. Of course. That's something I deal with when I teach Middle East or Arab issues courses. The underlying cause for America's support for Israel are well large and beyond not only any administration, but I have been, especially in Arabic, one of those people who disagree with the emphasis on the Israeli lobby. I've been very critical even of the thesis of Mersheimer and Wald, because I think it takes away the conservative element of American foreign policy and the responsibility it bears. for its own action and blame it in a nefarious way that can be troubling in some cases on a small pro-Israel lobby. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there are social and cultural, religious. I have been writing in Arabic and telling people about the notion of Christian Zionism. There's a new book that's going to come out by a historian at Rice University, Osama Maqdisi, which I read in manuscript, which talks about Christian Zionism has been an influence over many American presidents. Bill Clinton, for example, in the biography of him by David Marinus, he talks about how a minister in Arkansas told him to take care of Israel on his deathbed. I mean, with Clinton, you never know if it's true or not, but like, Harry Truman and many others, founding fathers. Christian Zionism, and in fact, the last book by the Israeli ambassador to America, Michael Oren, talks about, of course he exaggerates it to the point where he made it sound like the founding fathers wanted to occupy Palestine from the very beginning. So there are differences, and I think you're also supported by public opinion surveys. American public support for Israel remains very solid, 62, 63% versus 10 to 12% for Palestinians, which is opposite of how it is around the world, opposite what it is in Europe. So that is to be taken into consideration. I should also say that while American support for Israel has remained the same over the years, the nature of American support has changed. It used to be the most likely pro-Israeli groups in America were liberal Democrats from the big cities on the coast. Now they are Southern Baptists, Republicans. And those who are most likely to be the critics of Israel. So there are interesting changes, but I do agree with you. They are beyond an administration. But American public opinion on foreign policy, very excited here, is very shifty. Because this is a public that knows very little on foreign policy. I mean,
I completely agree, which is why I say that if he's just saying the suffering of Palestinians, for
exactly
98% of Americans, it's, suddenly there are something called Palestinian.
I mean,
so it has value, even if it's completely, contradicted by A through Z policies.
I mean, there's a very little known movie by Michael Moore called Canadian Bacon, which talks about an American president able to whip up fear of Canada among the Americans. And within 1 week, let's go and attack Canada. I mean, Iraq is a good case. So any American president, if she or he wants, can make Israel to be the danger that it is. In international public opinion, Israel is seen as a danger to peace. In Europe, Israel is seen as more danger to peace than Iran or China. In America, it's a different story, but America is the one that matters, so I agree with that, yeah.
Sami Ismail recently spoke about disarming the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon.
Who said that?
Sami Ismail.
Sami Ismail, yes.
Yeah. And I was wondering, what do you think?
You follow Lebanese politics?
A little bit, yeah. I'm not Lebanese, though.
Yeah.
And
you don't have to follow him.
Yeah. Well, he said it at the Phalange, I think, party headquarters. I'm not sure if it was at that event.
You're right. It was a Phalange party retreat. In that suite, they had a retreat.
Yeah. And he said, the Palestinian refugee camp should be disarmed. He used some, pretty violent language that the army should go in there and, really, disarm these Palestinians. Yeah. And I was wondering, what do you think the United States would do on that? And is the Lebanese army even capable of such an action? And the second thing is, I agree with your criticism about Obama, but then it makes me think, why bother with all of this, rhetoric and all of this, fighting words with Netanyahu and the criticisms from the Israeli lobby, and, AIPAC is circulating a letter, and it was sent to, Hillary Clinton, it was signed, 335 members of Congress. Why bother with all of that if at the end there's not going to be anything?
Because he's trying to achieve some political mileage. He wanted to move the so-called peace process in order to get some credit before the midterm election, that he was able to bring the Palestinian Israelis together, and he hasn't. He got frustrated, and he made these noises, and then he took them back. And most importantly, read the letter he wrote. It's in the Jerusalem Post, somebody sent to me today, that Obama wrote on the anniversary of Israel's founding. Read the letter that he wrote to the president of American Jewish Organizations, Council of Presidents of American Jewish Organizations. So these are significant ones. On the first question, really, when I was 15 years old, in 1975, the Phalange Party was a serious militia, right-wing, fascistic, and so on. which was quite dangerous, owned by Israel, and had a very brutal savage role in the Civil War. But I think to speak about the phalange in Lebanese politics today is like speaking about the American Communist Party. I mean, it has absolutely no bearing, no significance, no influence whatsoever. I mean, the country is now really largely a Sunni, Shiite conflict place. The Christians have been, unfortunately, quite marginalized, partly because of the deeds and the misdeeds and the crimes of the phalange. As for the Lebanese army, the army is a joke. I mean, I always say, like, for every Lebanese soldier, I mean, for every one Palestinian fighter, you need 1,000 Lebanese army soldiers. I mean, there has never been any encounter between the Lebanese army and the Palestinians in which they were able to do well. So they're afraid of the Palestinians. I mean, if you've been to Palestinian refugee camps, as I have, there are Lebanese army checkpoints outside of Palestinian refugee camps. So when you enter Ain Helwa, you see the checkpoint. I mean, you see the Lebanese army soldiers are frightened. I mean, literally, physically. They look frightened of the Palestinians. And I don't blame them for good reason. I mean, given the history of attempts by the Lebanese army to crack down on the Palestinians, they should be scared. And that's why they're not going to do anything about that.
So we don't have to worry about, like, Palestinians suffering?
No, I'm worried about the Palestinians in that way. And in fact, tomorrow I will post a translation for an article I just wrote on the Palestinian refugees for a Lebanese newspaper 2 weeks ago. I am worried about them. I'm worried about them from Israel. I'm worried about them from Shiites and Sunnis, from Arab governments, from Abu Mazen, from various schemes. But phalange is like Sami Ismail is very much like the dictum, the famous one about Hegel and Karl Marx, 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. The first history repeats itself the first time as tragedy, the second time as a farce. I mean, Sami Ismail is a farce. Don't bother with it.
Okay.
Yeah? Any other questions? Yeah?
It seems like there's been a lot of bad rap and a lot of problems
Where?
Like, for example, hate terrorism, bad image in the Arab world. Like, would it make more sense for America maybe to just ditch Israel and support the Arabs? That way the Arab population would like them maybe or something like that. And what does America gain exactly from supporting Israel?
I mean, Arab governments have not made America to pay for support for Israel. If anything, they're rewarding it. So why should America change? I mean, of course, I agree with what you said. I mean, you can make a clear case that America's support for Israel has been destructive for America's interests. I remember on September 11, when it first happened, for no reason, and I do not know why, I kept thinking of James Forrestal. Most of you have never heard of that guy. He was Secretary of Defense in the Truman administration when he was about to recognize Israel. And James Forrestal was the one who warned Truman, as did the military and intelligence advisor of Truman, that this would be devastating for America's long-term interests in the Middle East region. And I kept thinking about it. So of course, but they don't see it that way. And Arab governments are now facilitating, helping America to not suffer for its support for Israeli war crimes. Yes?